Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amanda Bridgers. I'm a training management specialist here at Procore, and we are here to talk about creating company-specific SOPs and Procore certification processes. Joining me today is going to be Noah Yates, Construction Technology Specialist from Crowder Constructors, Inc. And finally, we're going to close out with Dino Nishi, our Senior Director of Documentation and Certifications. Now, to kick things off today, I do want to do a high-level overview of what is training management. Well, to be precise, there are two different portions of the training management category. There's the Procore Training Center, which is our content management system. Lives on Procore's support site, support.procore.com, and it is a company-specific section that is privatized just for you. From here, you can build company-specific best practices and SOPs and role-based training for internal and external collaborators if you'd like. You can strategically reuse Procore's already existing content like our tutorials, workflows, or videos, or if you need to hybridize or change any of that content for any reason, you can create hybrid versions of our tutorials or alter those workflows, or build out completely company-specific SOPs that really take place entirely outside of Procore. Our goal here is to make this your end users' single source of truth, where they always know they can go for any training materials they need. Now, in addition to that, a certification center, on the other hand, it lives on learn.procore.com or education.procore.com, and this is more of our learning management system. From here, you can build company-specific courses for either role-based training or anything else related to the construction industry that you may need your users to know, be it training for project managers, superintendents, or subcontractors, just like Procore has. You can clone what we've already got and alter that content as you see fit. Or you can build completely company-specific training for things like safety on the job site or best practices for construction accounting. From here, you can also provide certificates for your users so they can confirm that they've completed it, or you can track user completions right in the Procore web application. Now, to speak more to how these can be used for you, we have Noah Yates, the Construction Technology Specialist of Crowder Constructors, joining us today. Thanks for joining us. How are you today, Noah?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, hey, to kick things off a little bit here, let's just start with what were you using prior to Procore's training management platform? Were you using one of those binders on HR management's desk or a shared file system, person-to-person training, and why was it important for you to switch over at the time that you did?
Yeah, we kind of had three different things going on that needed an update or a switch, change that we found the training center and certification center to be perfect for. The first thing was we were sending our users, at the time we were sending our users to do the standard Procore certifications that Procore has for every user to do. And those are great. I think all those certifications are fine and the interface is wonderful. The problem for us is that our company doesn't use financials tools in Procore. We don't use incidents. We have other software for that. Yeah, so we have software for financials, for safety, and even some of the labor activities. We just don't use Procore for it. So we were sending our users to do these certifications, and we found that it wasn't a good idea for them to be spending time learning things that they won't touch, at least in the short term. So we needed kind of a different approach to how we were certifying people to be proficient in Procore. The second thing was you're updating our operations manuals for some of our divisions. And, at that time, there was a lot of talk, but not a lot of action going on. We just had, a lot of guys had ideas for what needed to be updated. But the biggest thing that needed to be updated was that we had this, the current state of the operations manual was this, this giant binder here that the guys were using. I call it a booster seat of information just because it's so giant and heavy, like 25 pounds. It's great to have that manual on your shelf to be able to access it, but it's just not as efficient as having something digitized that can be updated at one location for everyone to use instantly, whether they're in the field or they're in their office or on the go, wherever they are. Having that updated manual, but also having a manual that talked to what we're learning in Procore. We're telling all of our users that they have to be using Procore for their projects. well, why not tell them how to use Procore and also how it works with what we're mandating our employees to do for their day-to-day tasks or whatever company operations they have going on. So that was kind of the second thing that was going to be updated that and changed at the time. The third kind of area was we have our company intranet. We've got our private employee portal for all kinds of forms and documents and information. And some of that's referenced in the operations manual, but we just needed to get that whole cloud of information to talk to, this giant binder, and also talk to Procore and have it a one-stop shop for all of our employees to go to. We needed to integrate and just have some overall clarity of, as a new user or a new employee with Procore, with Crowder, and a new user with Procore, to where to go, but also have a reference for existing users and employees to go to. So a lot of managers were asking for those updated standards and just some overall clarity about how to approach Procore at the start of the job and also to close out.
Wow, that's great information. Now, speaking to that 25-pound booster seat and that portal that you had everything in previously, how was the build-out process and pulling content from there into your now certification and training centers?
Well, it was, it was a little intimidating at first because you see you're developing this online training center. You think you have to be a web designer or an IT background, but really it's a lot easier to use than you might think. I equate it to using Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. If you're proficient at moving around text and images and tables and hyperlinking things, that's all you really need to be able to do. You guys were really helpful, kind of hold my hand for the first few weeks and me getting used to kind of the interface, but it doesn't take long to get the hang of it and really start cranking out material. We started in, I think, June of last year, working on the training center, and some of the staff and the managers in our corporate leadership were working with the regional managers in the different divisions to come up with the updated ops manual material, and I was just cranking them into the training center and linking things around. We did that up through I think in the fall, and that's when the certification center became available, and we started working on those custom certifications and getting those trimmed up. The best part about the training center I found was there's a lot of content reuse. You can just take what Procore already has and make it your own. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can start from scratch if you want, but there's, I find the certifications to be, the current ones in Procore to be very, very efficient and very, you're not spending a lot of time, but you're learning a lot quickly. So I was taking those and just cutting out, the incidents tool from the quality and safety certification. Just trimming those things up and making them a Crowder certification and throwing them in the training center. And, we had, I think by the end of the year, we kind of had something operational, and that's when we started testing it out with users from, our 2-month-old interns to someone who's been in the company for 15, 20 years, and really getting that full analysis of how the information flows. So really 6 to 8 month time is you can have something available. It really just depends on how much time you want to spend on creating that content that your company wants to redo or create, for your employees to use. But you guys had a lot of great suggestions on templates to use, images, just designs to work with, So the content reuse and having those successful kind of layout design and templates were great. I think another good part of the training center is you can privatize whatever you want. So, when you go to the landing page of our training center, you can't, if you're not a Crowder employee, you can't just click and go in wherever you want. So there's a level of comfort that, our managers and corporate leadership found with being able to keep things internal to certain Procore users and not have everything out there for anybody to look at. But it also helps kind of steering the user to where they need to go. So when you go to our landing page, if you're a sub or an owner, an engineer, there's a spot right there that you need to click on that to go do what you need to do. So I was pretty impressed with how we could create an interface like that so quickly. You had a training center, and then within that you had your certifications you created from the certification center. And then, as a company admin, I had right there within Procore a certification analytics, tool for me to jump in and see the progress of who was doing what and who was completing what and when that was happening. So, again, have something operational, and to be able to go look at, how it's being used. It doesn't take too long at all to get something created.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now, let's talk a little bit more about that analytics that you got and all of those user-specific trainings and everything there. What out of all of that do you think has really been your biggest return on investment? And what's some feedback that you've heard from your users, both internal, external, executive teams? Let's fill us in a little bit on that.
Well, personal return on investment is I don't get as many phone calls or emails or questions. I think, I still get plenty, but I think people are more sufficient, more proficient with what they're doing. They kind of understand, a little deeper into understanding, what they can do themselves and what the permission levels really dictate and allow them to do versus someone who maybe have only read-only or standard permission. So just jumping into some of the tools a little further and having a new approach to reviewing those things you see in the tutorials, that's been great. But obviously as a company, we're trying to get the usage up. And I look at, every month I get a 3-month report from our customer success manager in Procore. And basically that's a 3-month snapshot each month. Each month we have the previous 3 months data of what's going on, what tools are being used the most, what projects are using what tools, all these items created. We've got counts for each of the projects of how many submittals are being imported, or how many punch list items, or how many photos, data log entries. We've got this data. And what we found is when we compiled that, the 4 months that have passed since we kind of rolled the training center out and everything this year, that usage represents 280% of what we were doing before in the previous 8 months. So basically, before the rollout happened, versus now, the guys are creating about 2 to 3 times the amount of items in Procore. So a lot of that is guys are doing a lot more things in bulk because they know how to use the imports app, things like that. But we found that we're just getting higher quality and quantity of our day-to-day items, like daily logs, photos that our field staff is doing. That's something we've really pushed in the rollout, is really communicating, with our new operations manual and our minimum standards being updated. It's very clear of what guys need to be doing. And it's also very clear that they're going to be held accountable for it. Because with the rollout, we've also found our managers doing more custom reports and getting those things distributed to weekly or monthly to, our operations managers. So they, our guys know that your managers and your manager's manager are looking at these things weekly and monthly. They're getting these reports automatically in their inbox, and then they're discussing it with their site superintendents, but also the safety managers. We want to be on the lookout for any, trends in safety or things that we need to adjust or fix, in our different regions. But yeah, overall, we've had a huge boost in usage, which has been kind of our goal since, after rolling out Procore for a few years, we had to get our usage up. So yeah, it's been a huge return on investment. And I've had certain PMs and senior PMs come and say to me in more or less words that, hey, this is perfect timing. for our new projects. We've needed something like this for a while. We never had people on the same page as to what's expected from during pre-construction for setting up Procore jobs and how tools are going to be used and things like that. So yeah, all positive things.
That all makes me so happy to hear. Thank you for that. So now let's just talk, just to wrap things up a little, we're going to want to kick it over to Dean in just a few minutes. But to close out here, are there any quick tips or pieces of advice you would give to anybody currently trying to build out their company SOPs or thinking about looking into the training management platform? Anything you'd like to close out with there?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, like I said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel on all of this. You can start from scratch, but there's a lot of great existing Procore content that you can use. Maybe create a hybrid between things you want to create versus things that are in Procore already. And you don't have to spend a huge amount of time working from scratch. The great thing I like about the training center and certification center is I can come back at any time and just tweak it. I can go into edit mode like a web designer and do more or less. So if you're looking to get off the ground, there's a lot of things you can use already that are successful and have been proven in the industry to work. You don't have to work from scratch on everything. The other thing I would say is constantly get fresh eyes on your material. As you're creating these things, you get kind of numb to the navigational side. Where everything's going to be, where you're putting everything and how everything kind of links up. But someone goes in there, if you roll this out and people go in there and get lost on the first page, or they're confused, they're not going to want to use it. So you got to have that, that feedback from, an intern up to project manager, up to a division manager. You need to have, because this is something that's a landing page for everyone in your company to use. So if anybody goes on there, they need to know right away where to click without having to call you up and get lost. So along with that, you want to keep your users engaged coming back. So you need to make it kind of a successful interface. Something that's you're constantly adding to or updating, getting fresh material in there. We rolled out this training center, but we also have been hosting our own webinars. I do it monthly. It's almost exactly like a Procore deep dive, but it's a Crowder deep dive. That's not what we call it, but it's more or less the same thing, because we want to show people again, hey, maybe you did the certification, but let's talk about it some more, or maybe you're struggling with it. But you have that approach, but you also want to talk about how your company is using that tool and maybe the minimum standards or something you've rolled out. So you want to have that conversation about here's how to do it in Procore, but also how Crowder or your company does it. And you can also have that conversation because, these things are being used different ways on different projects. You can have several guys. We've had guys all the time say, hey, I've had a good success doing this, this, and this. Why don't you try that? Because people have their own obligations to the owners, or different kinds of contract setups that they need different kinds of solutions. So it's a tutorial, it's a webinar, but it's also kind of a collaboration of thought. The last piece of information, which is probably the biggest, is make sure you have buy-in and push from the top down. You really have to have somebody kind of above your users, looking down and saying, giving the direction, and not just have the Procore admin guy. I've got 10 years of experience, and there's guys out there, I'm telling them to complete this training. They've got more experience, longer than I've been alive. And it's a little different coming from their managers versus me, where they may see me as more of like an IT role. And but if they have their manager saying, hey guys, we're doing this, this is where we're heading, they're going to be more accountable and more willing to do it. But you can't just have them demanding it, saying, do this by this date or else. You also need to have them explaining, why, the direction behind it. They will be more engaged if they understand that we're doing this to make their lives easier and for them to save time and less headaches in the field, whatever, than they will be if they just see it as another thing on their to-do list for the day. So that would be my advice.
And that's stellar advice. Thank you for all of that. It was a pleasure to get to chat with you again today, just as much as it was to be able to help build that out with you in the beginning. Thank you so, so much for your time. Everything was super valuable. To close
Absolutely.
things out here, thank you. To close things out here, I'm going to go ahead and bounce over to Dean Onishi, our Senior Director of Documentation and Certification, to talk about what's coming up next. Dean, over to you.
Thanks, thanks, Amanda. And thank you, Noah, again, for sharing your amazing story with us. It's really impressive to see what you've been able to build in less than a year, and the results really do speak for themselves. I mean, a 3x increase in your Procore usage is phenomenal, both in quantity and quality, as you mentioned. So that's exactly what we aspire every one of our training center clients to reap that kind of ROI. For all of you out there that are hearing Noah's story for the very first time, what he built yesterday for his company, Grouter Constructors, is exactly what you could build tomorrow for your company. And our customer education teams have been really busy over this past year, building out all the educational resources that you need to train your end users. We've recently published new product documentation for portfolio financials and capital planning on our support website, and have also published several new Procore certification courses specifically for owners and specialty contractors, with many more to come. And really what that means to all of you is that regardless of whether you're a general contractor, an owner, or specialty contractor, you can start building today. You have everything that you need to start building your own custom training center and certification center. We have a dedicated team that is ready to help you and guide you throughout the build out process. So you're not alone. And especially in today's environment where everyone is even more reliant on technology to do their jobs, these products really can help and help you create that single source of truth that's both easy to access and easy to maintain. So if you're interested in learning more about what you heard today or have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your Procore point of contact. We'd love to hear from you. And on behalf of Amanda, Noah, and me, we hope you enjoyed this session. We hope you take what you learned today and are in some way inspired to become that groundbreaker and that difference maker at your company. So thank you.